Welcome back, everyone, to Business Aspirin. I'm your host, Clint Junell. And on our podcast, we talk about how we solve business pain points. And today we have with us Mitch Zembik. And Mitch is with Get Right, Mitigation and Restoration out of Prescott, Arizona. Mitch, how you doing, man?
Doing very well, Clint. Thank you for asking, sir.
Absolutely. So happy to have you on here. So let's talk a little bit about Get Right and your role at Get Right and how you got into restoration and all those types of things. So how did you guys start Get Right Restoration?
Absolutely. So 8 years ago, my best friend of 30 years and I were looking to start a business, and he was actually in the restoration space working for another independent contractor. And in our discussions regarding business and what that looked like, we started really looking into the restoration space and what that company that he was working for at the time was doing right, doing wrong. And then we really kind of dived into other companies in the space in our area and found that there was a need. There was a lot of companies that were in the restoration space, but not necessarily doing things the right way. They were just going through the motions, a lot of high charges for unnecessary work and things like that. And so it was just an opportunity that we saw to bring an honest and integral part of the community into that space and give the community a company that did things the right way.
Okay. So 8 years ago, he was in restoration. What were you doing 8 years ago?
8 years ago, I was actually in sales. So my background is in sales and marketing. I owned a Red Wing boot store at the time.
Nice.
When I started this company.
Yeah. I saw a pretty funny social media thing where there's this guy that shows up to Red Wings and he's mad because he walks in and it's not wings. He thought he was going to get wings. I thought it was pretty funny. So that was a pretty comical thing. So talk to me then a little bit about what you had a Red Wing store 8 years ago. So what led to, did you sold that business off? You just closed that business?
Ended up closing it and selling off the inventory and such. Saw an opportunity that this was really where my passion was. My passion came from helping people, helping others. And so I really wanted to do something that was a little bit more in line with that on a grander scale than selling boots. Not that selling work boots isn't a good thing or something that's definitely needed, but wasn't quite at the scale that I was looking to help people. And so we saw the opportunities in this, and it just seemed to make more sense for me to jump on this side full time.
Okay. So where were you in life at that time? I know you're talking about going on vacation with the kids in a little bit. So let's talk about 8 years ago. What was life like?
8 years ago. So it's changed a little bit, but in the grand scheme, it hasn't changed a lot. I actually have 4 children. My oldest is about to be 16 and start driving. I got another one. My son Liam is 12. I got another one, Lucas, who's 10. And then our youngest with my current wife my wife that I'm with now is now 7. So basically, she came into the picture right about that time when we were doing all of this transition. So we did have 1 kid additional during that time. But my wife and I had Sam, and then kind of kept growing from there. As far as the personal aspect of things, I had been a business owner with a wife and 3 kids for quite a few years prior to. So it didn't change a ton in that regard, but the industry is what changed. My time, efforts, stress levels, all of those things significantly increased when I joined the restoration industry in comparison to boot sales.
For sure. I mean, generally speaking, when you're going to open the boot store and when you're going to shut it down in the afternoon, and if you're going to work on Saturdays or whatever you're going to work, those things, right? And it's a different model when you jump into restoration. And we joke all the time that once you get into the restoration space, you can never get out. People suck you in, and you're here and you're stuck, and life just has a way of reeling you back into it. Okay, so then in that case, you have a new wife once you've kind of started this process. And let's talk, because a lot of people, when they become an entrepreneur, it's difficult to navigate the entrepreneurial side of things. You're already an entrepreneur. You knew you had your responsibilities. You change roles as an entrepreneur to a different industry. And now this one has the phone ringing at 3 a.m. And you are bringing a new wife into this type of environment, which is weird. Why are you taking calls at 3 a.m., Mitch? Right? So let's talk about, because the family dynamic is a difficult part for a lot of entrepreneurs to understand, especially if they're jumping into an emergency service related business, whether it's emergency plumbing or restoration and things like what we do. That's a difficult aspect of it. So how have you guys managed that with, obviously an ex and 3 other kids and expectations, and, sometimes the phone rings at 7 p.m. on a Friday and you're supposed to be going to dinner and now you're not. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have to say, first and foremost, I'm incredibly blessed. My ex-wife and my current wife, my wife, Savannah, they get along great. Co-parenting is fantastic. So I will tell you, in comparison to most in my situation, I have it easier just because they're willing to work together. But from the aspect of the business side of things, communication was everything. Really talking through what it was that we were trying to accomplish, our goals and things with the company, what we were trying to do, having her be on board with that and understand it and be very supportive of what the role that I was taking and the responsibilities. Without her support, it would have probably all been for naught. So it's been very difficult, challenging. All of my kids play sports. I coach 3 of those sports that they play. So on top of my business stuff, coaching is actually one of my favorite things to do. I joke with the other coaches that I coach with, it's the only time during the week that I actually completely shut myself off from the world. And there's just no existence of anything but sports in that moment.
Yeah.
And in our industry, as you know, that's a very weird thing.
Are those 3 sports the same sport?
No. I actually coach softball, I coach baseball, and I coach football.
Yeah, it's interesting. So for me, like I help with my oldest was a hockey kid, right?
Oh, okay.
And hockey is not a thing for me. I can skate. I can't skate nearly like they can. That trajectory left me in a hurry. Plus, they're surrounded by a barrier of glass, right? You can't do anything to help coach in that environment unless you're really talented.
Right.
My daughter dances.
Okay.
And you're not allowed to even be around all that. Like dance is a weird world. So, she does her thing.
My daughter danced. My daughter danced for 8 years before she went back into sports. Yeah. My oldest.
So she does volleyball, which I can be around and deal with that. But then the dance part is her primary thing. And then my youngest plays baseball, so I can be around him and help that. And it's true. Now for me, I'll still, if I'm coaching first base, I may still answer the phone and put the earbud in and navigate a project and be like, sorry, we're at a baseball field right now, so you're going to have to just navigate this, but let's get your project put together. But I'm with you, right? So for me, for a long time, it has always been mountain biking was one of those things. Snow skiing and mountain biking were those things that forced me to turn my brain off. And so you bring up a good point. Entrepreneurs have this difficulty in a lot of cases navigating how to decompress. Like even going on vacation doesn't necessarily solve that because there's downtime in a vacation. And as a result of the downtime of a vacation, you get to think about what's going on in the business and that gets stressful. So for me, snow skiing, if I'm hitting moguls or skiing trees, I have to shut my brain off from that perspective and focus on what's happening right now. Same thing for mountain biking, or you die, right? I'm going to run into a tree head first. And that's an interesting point that you bring up. So I don't know that I've had this conversation with anybody else on the podcast so far, but you touched on that. And it's like, sometimes I have to be able to shut my brain off because even when I go to bed, it's not, right? It's still running. It's still going. There's still things happening. And I'm awake at 3 a.m. thinking about stuff and go, okay, what do we do here? How do we navigate this? And that part is a burden in itself that you have to carry as an entrepreneur. So it's good that you found there's other things that you can do that allow you to disengage from yourself, your own brain, and entrepreneurial activity.
So that one is my main, just because I don't have a choice in it. It's a scheduled event that I have to go to. There's 13 to 20 kids there that are expecting me to be on point, there for them. So that one's an easier one for me just because it's more forced. The one that actually is fully by choice and it's my true disconnect is actually building Legos.
Okay.
So last night, I actually just built the Jango Fett head, the Star Wars head, with my 7-year-old. So that is one of my favorite things is interacting with my kids with Legos and building Lego sets that we end up displaying here at my office.
That's pretty great. And I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, so I don't know, but we have I don't know if it's Boba Fett or Jango Fett and the Darth Vader head and a Stormtrooper head and a couple of those things that they've done. My oldest was really into Lego. My little guy got into it a little bit as a result. Yeah, I get it, man. That's good though, because then it's okay. Let's focus on what we're doing here. Just navigate these next steps and follow these instructions and do this part. And I think that's pretty great because I think that's important that people that are going to jump into entrepreneurship have is some outlet for your business ceases to exist if you can't find a way to separate yourself from it and disengage at some point to just let your mind and your body rest from the day-to-day of entrepreneurial activities. because it's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a weight that's constantly carried, and it's very heavy. It's very stressful. I mean, obviously we're all, any of us who are entrepreneurs are very blessed to be in the position that we're in, but a lot of people don't understand the weight that it carries. And so, yeah, having that time to truly disconnect and be able to have, make those memories with your kids, with your wife, with your family, and be able to have that disconnect. If you don't have it, it ends up carrying you down.
Yeah. I mean, so many people
Carrying.
that look at us from the outside think that life is so spectacular because you own your own business. And I mean, you got these fancy trucks and you're just killing it. Your life is so great. Right. And they don't see the reality of it. I tell people all the time, it's owning your own business is a great idea until you own your own business. And then it's not. And I've got friends, like I look at one of my very good friends, my kids call him Uncle Chris, he's a pilot in the Air Force. And then is a pilot for Southwest Airlines now. He works on average 3 days a week. He gets up early one morning, goes to the airport, flies out for a couple of days, does a couple things, comes back. He doesn't have to worry about answering his phone when it rings on the weekends. He doesn't have to worry about anything. All he has to worry about, and it's not that it's not stressful, right? You have hundreds of people's lives in your hands when you're flying this airplane. But at the end of the day, it's not this burden and weight of I've got families to feed, I've got employees to take care of, I've got to make this rent, I got to make payroll, I got to make payroll taxes. There's just a lot to navigate. Go fly a plane, get a paycheck. There's days where you look at it and you go, dang, did I make the right decision? Right? It's hard, right? Let's talk about what was the biggest challenge you faced in transitioning from Red Wings to Get Right?
I would say the biggest challenge was knowledge, the understanding the industry, understanding the work that we were doing, the proper ways to do things, the ins and outs of business as a whole. It was a very different game for me when I came to Get Right in comparison to the Red Wing store. Things were a lot more systematic when it came to the store. I had processes in place, and it was a lot easier to control. There was only one employee on top of me, so that was all much easier to manage. When you get into, running 7 projects and, 10, 15 field employees while still trying to field phone calls and all still while trying to learn the knowledge of what it is that you're doing. You jump in head first and we all, do the best that we can with the knowledge that we have, but constantly trying to grow that knowledge. So that I would say just trying to put all of those pieces in the puzzle together at once was challenging for sure. But I would say the biggest piece of advice I would give in regards to that transition would be lean into the knowledge that's out there. I wasted a lot of time not leaning into the knowledge of entrepreneurs, books, podcasts, videos, all of these things that are out there of people talking through these very things, that we're discussing, and, the real issues of life and family and business and trying to navigate all these waters. I feel like maybe if I would have leaned into those things sooner, then I would have had a little bit easier road. But all in all of those pieces together was probably the difficulty that I would say was the heaviest, just trying to keep all of those balanced.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, right? Because that's exactly what this podcast is about, is trying to help people from banging their head against the wall. Is there a key place where you think you got the most knowledge for? There's 2 categories in my head and what you're dealing with: entrepreneurship and restoration. Was there a key place for both or either of those that you remember going, this is a ticket for helping me really understand what we're doing?
So I will say, as far as the entrepreneurship goes, a recent book that I read 8 years in is probably the most powerful one that I will say. It's the one that gave me the best overall aspect view of what it was I was dealing with and really trying to delve into the understanding. And it was Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great book too.
That just understanding all of the pieces that I was trying to hold and do all at the same time, and not, giving those pieces away, not trusting team members and things to take the things on that I had hired them for, that I had trained them for. That was a huge eye opener. Just understanding that I think one of my favorite things about the book is 80% done by somebody else is 100% freaking awesome. And that was something that was really hard to understand when I first read it. I was like, but it's not right. It's not what I need it to be. And then the more I, thought about that, it was like, it doesn't have to be perfect yet. It just has to be good. We
Yeah.
can work on, on finite and getting it down to the proper processes and stuff, but let's get a good product out there. Let's start producing what we can with the people we have, and then we can go from there. So I would say that was the biggest in regards to that. In regards to restoration, a couple sides of it. One of the biggest was my business partner. His knowledge of the industry, Tad, him being in the industry for 6 years prior to us starting this company, was huge for me. He was by my side in the field. We did all of the work, of course, starting the company out. So I got to be by his side, learning the ins and outs of the field work, of the industry, of the water, of the mold, of the asbestos. All of those things we got to really delve deeply into, which I fear in some cases, if you're not the one in the field doing the work, potentially in a different situation, you may miss out on that ability to gain that knowledge, firsthand and in detail the way that they do in the field before you jump onto the other side.
Well, there's always so many learning experiences when you get into the field doing any of that type of work. It's like there's new stuff that pops up all the time. And you're like, well, there's a first. I've been doing this for 30 years, and this is the first. Okay, all right. You think you've seen it all. Well, there's always ways to learn, always ways to grow. And so I certainly appreciate that. I think it's important that people understand the significance of, finding those resources to get the education and understanding how that impacts your ability to grow. Like one of the things I've said multiple times when we've been on the podcast and recording is the reality is you have to be able to delegate some of that stuff out and trust those, like what you were saying. Because my father had a plumbing, heating, air conditioning business. And for him, a lot of it was like, there was a struggle to grow because he wanted the quality to be so perfect that he wanted to put his hands on everything. And I learned a lot from doing that. And I appreciate that. And I understand the reality of it. I also understood that as we grew, I couldn't touch everything. Because if I did, we were not going to be able to do what we were trying to do. And so, yes, 80% done by someone else is 100% awesome, because then you can just tweak the little bits of it that you need to tweak to get it where you need to be. As long as you learn how to set those expectations. One of the things I've done with some of my team is, like, there are parts of my team that if I ask them to do something for me, they're going to completely lock up, right? Because they want it to be right and they don't want to screw it up. And maybe I didn't give them 100% clear instruction and it's going to freak them out and I'm never going to get what I want. But in a lot of levels, I've learned how to go, okay, here's what I need. This is what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm going to do with it. I would like for you to put something together for me and then maybe give me 3 options of this type of thing. And then I'll pick one of them and I'll finish it out. And that takes the pressure off of them, because now it's like, well, if Clint F's it up, it's Clint's fault because Clint F'd it up. I gave him what he asked me for. And I think that's been great because it's really, in the reality, them be able to be more free to provide me what I need. And most of the time it comes out pretty great. Like,
right.
It's, it's
giving
like,
them
okay,
giving them the freedom of creativity and
mm-hmm.
to do, what they believe is right with it instead of specific instruction. And then you're able, a lot of times that's
a
good thing that I've picked up as well.
Transparently, there's still sometimes I get it and I'm frustrated. I'm like, ugh, right? But they did exactly what I needed them to do. They created for me what I needed them to create. And as a result, it put me in a position to be able to get something better and more efficiently delivered to the end user, whoever that was going to be, with whatever we were asking for. So
absolutely, and gave them the confidence of knowing that they could produce something for you the next time that you asked.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about when you jumped into this, you understood the processes and had things in place on the boot business, but you didn't have them here. So let's talk about some have you implemented some processes now? How did you implement processes? What's the importance of processes? Let's just talk about what you saw and what you did.
Absolutely. So I would say, as far as processes goes, I lacked in processes in this business for a long period of time. I had a misunderstanding of how important they were to have certain things in place. We have just in the last year and a half, to be 100% transparent, really started to delve into our processes, procedures, and started lining things out. That was as a result of, I believe, hitting the quote unquote ceiling. We had grown to a certain point and beyond that point even, and we're producing work, just crazy amounts, but things were falling through the cracks. Things were not getting completed. Things weren't getting checked on. Paperwork wasn't getting, printed or signed, or documentation wasn't being done. And so ultimately you start seeing these pieces. And luckily I have a consultant friend of mine that I work closely with, that we've been working together for this past year and a half. And ultimately, he kind of let me do my thing to start and explain, why we don't have this, why we have this, why these things have been important. And the more and more that, we touched every week on pain points of, what are you seeing? Okay, well, I'm not getting the documentation I need. The guys aren't showing up to jobs on time anymore. They're spending too much time in the office. They're, going to the gas station, whatever the case may be. And he's like, well, you realize if you just had a process in place that said this is how their day goes, you wouldn't have that issue as much anymore. You would just be individually saying, okay, we got to tweak this, work on this. I was like, yeah, I see that now that you said it, but no, I didn't see that before. And I just kept spinning my wheels.
Yeah.
So
it's not just you, dude. That's all of us. Like all of us in the entrepreneur space have jumped into something that we really didn't understand. And basically just kind of held on for the ride and tried to make it work. Right. You had a lot of grit, and a lot of commitment. And you're trying to make things happen. And it's as you learn how that works that puts you in a position where you can really be successful in the growth of your entrepreneurial business. We did the same thing. So, are you using any tools to establish? I mean, some of the stuff that you said like rings so true with our growth as a restoration company that then led to us, like, honestly, stuff was slipping through the cracks. I knew we were missing things and we weren't billing for stuff we had done. And it was like, okay, we got to solve this. And so we created a software to solve that. What tools have you utilized to try to help minimize the stuff slipping through the cracks, creating the processes? Is it just the consultant, or like we use EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, a book called Traction that helps kind of, hey, do these things, get the people in the right seats on the right bus and all that. Like what have you utilized to create these processes?
Absolutely. So my consultant that I work with, Scott, he actually does a version of Traction, different model of the same type of situation, creating that, that overall picture of the company, who sits in what seats, which ultimately, of course, early on in entrepreneurship, you end up writing your own name next to those, every one of the slots on the org chart, right? So that was kind of the big thing, was him putting those things in place, breaking out the roles and responsibilities for each title, having titles. That was one of the biggest things that I will say was a mistake in our organization was, my field technicians never truly had a title, nor did they have a growth plan strategy that gave them a picture of what it looked like to work here, to be here, and to grow as an employee. It was just showing up and doing their job, which, I had people that were completely okay with that. And there's some that are, but for the most part, the team that I was attempting to build, a lot of so-called A players that were trying to get to work at, a high pace and high frequency together, they need to know, what does this look like? What does the picture look like for me? Where am I going to go here? Because they're not just along for the ride. They don't want to just be there. And so that was one of the biggest things, was truly putting titles to people, roles and responsibilities, and explaining to them the expectations. And we're far from where we need to be in that aspect. That's my main focus right now. And the books that I'm actually reading now and trying to grow as an entrepreneur is also trying to grow as a leader. I'm trying to understand better how to lead my team, how to give them the power and enable them to have that confidence to grow as an employee and as a person.
Yeah. But, from the purpose of this podcast, like what you're saying is spot on, right? It's find the tools, maybe get a consultant, work through the process, make sure you're taking care of your team, make sure you're building things out the right direction. There's Tyler and I are going to a conference this week in Scottsdale, actually. So we'll be out close to you.
Oh, nice.
And it's with Brandon Dawson. And he talks about you're only going to build your business with people. And people is what builds your business. You can create whatever process you want. You can create all the marketing you want, but you got to have your people in place correctly. And then that's where the processes come in place to make sure you have the people in the right seats doing the right job. Because you can have a really spectacular A player and have them in the wrong role and really screw up everything. And you can have an A player that's a cancer they're really good at their job, but they're a cancer and they're ruining the whole thing too. You got to be really cautious about all that. And it's hard, especially when you're growing and you need help and you're in this spot and you think you got to keep these people and deal with all of it. And sometimes getting rid of them is the best thing. And sometimes pivoting their position is the best thing. And it's hard to navigate all that as an entrepreneur and figure out what's going to be the right decision here. Well, I love hearing that you've, embraced some of that and you're doing the processes and you have a consultant, and it's spectacular that things are going well for you in that case. And I'm glad to hear all of that.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And definitely, Clint, there's been some softwares and stuff that we've utilized as well.
Sure.
Just complete transparency. Company Cam has been big for us in regards to photo documentation. It's just, something that was an easy process for our guys to implement and understand how to get those things in there, because as you know, photos are everything. If you didn't take a picture of it, if you don't have a video, it didn't take place. And so, that was a big one for us. We did implement clean claims process, which did help us in regards to some documentation and stuff. We struggled a little bit with the implementation of clean claims, just because getting that process down and getting them to understand the way that the mitigation process works, especially on the carrier side, dealing with the insurance, when deadlines have to be in and when those pieces have to be already available. That was kind of a task that we're still tackling in regards to getting the guys fully bought in and understanding that process and how to document and all. But it's definitely helped us progress a lot towards the goal that we're trying to get to and the vision that we're trying to build.
And it's not easy in anything to implement new technology, new systems, new processes throughout a company. It's from the entrepreneurial standpoint, I think it's imperative that you do that early. The earlier you do that, the easier it is to get buy-in on things. And so some of it is, like in your case, you're trying to implement a software program that says this is how things are supposed to operate when you've already been operating. And so that creates a problem and a little bit of a, conflict, because that's not how we do things, but this is the way the software says we have to do things. And
especially with your A players who do a really good job and are so bought into the way that you've always done things.
Yeah.
They're some of the most difficult ones to get over that hump.
I really like Lane. I think he's a good dude. We 100% built ours to not do that. Like, you get to do your processes the way you do them, because none of us run our restoration companies exactly the same.
Right.
Even project managers within a company may not do exactly the same thing, as long as the results are the right and within this confine. So we built ours to not do that. So I get it, but it's hard to get people to buy in on anything. Getting people to change what they do is really, really tough. And so as an entrepreneur, if somebody's trying to, if you're listening to this podcast thinking about jumping into something, like, I get it. You can't afford to add software now. You can't afford to, start doing these processes. But the reality is, absolutely have to do that now, because that's the best way to get where.
You can't afford not to.
Yeah, you can't afford not to. It's going to cost you later. And then trying to navigate, the pivot is very difficult. Okay, so let's talk about, what is something you wish someone would have told you prior to getting started?
I believe that I probably would have liked to know that the statement that you have to find balance doesn't actually exist. I think I wish I would have known that, that they say, oh, you have to have this work-life balance. Yes, you do. I understand the statement now and what they mean by it, but it truly doesn't exist. It's important to understand balance is a mindset more than it is an actuality. As long as you can stay balanced in your mindset and stay focused and keep those priorities in check, whether it be family or business, then you'll be better off. But the idea that you will have true balance is just not real. There's too much that weighs on either side. There's too much unpredictability. And that's not just with business, that's with family. You have illnesses, deaths, things that take place that you can't account for. And now all of a sudden the balance is out of balance. And so I think understanding that there truly is discipline is more important than balance. If you can be disciplined in what you do every day, the balance will find itself eventually, and it will work itself out through the ups and downs of the roller coaster. But you have to have that discipline to understand that no matter what it is today, that problem is going to exist and you just have to tackle it.
Yeah, I think that term comes from employees that don't have an entrepreneurial mindset. Let's see if I can say that politically correctly without being really offensive. And so well, yeah, I've got to have work-life balance, right? Because life is just too hard and too stressful. And I 100% agree that there are a lot more things to living than just making a living. And so if you want to be in that role where you mentioned it at one point, A players, you have some that are A players and some that are just coming for a job. Sometimes they're just going to come do their job. And in that case, maybe they do need work-life balance. And some people want to strive for better and more. And if you're committed to more and better, you don't get that work-life balance. Like, I've got to work more. I've got to make it happen. And the reality is entrepreneurship provides some freedoms and opportunities to go coach kids sports, maybe to be off at a different time. But the reality for us is, like, yeah, I don't have a boss now. I have 300 bosses per year that I'm obligated to work for and meet with and navigate issues with. So I appreciate you saying that, right? There are some certain benefits to being the entrepreneur. And then there's a lot of headaches to being the entrepreneur. And for some of us, like, I need that pressure. I don't need to be idle. I don't need to, we're running a software company, a restoration company. I help with the foundation that serves tragically injured. We're doing this podcast. We've got some coaching stuff that we're working on. And I got 3 kids that all do multiple sports. So I don't know what I would do if I just had a job that I went to work at 9 to 5 and, who knows what that would look like.
Had to rely on someone else to be able to ask that question. Can I go coach? Can I leave early to do this? Yeah. And there's no option to say I'm going to, but I also know that I have to work on an estimate until 10 o'clock tonight after the game, because that's what this calls for.
That's what it is. That's pretty great. Pretty great. What is something that has surprised you in entrepreneurship? Like, you just didn't see it coming. You're like, crap. Or even on the amazing side of things, right? But what's something's like, I didn't expect that.
I truly didn't know how hard it would be. I think that is the biggest learning lesson in all of this for me, in owning multiple businesses now and growing this. Being a business owner, being an entrepreneur is the hardest thing that I've ever done. Pushing through when there is no one to lean on, there is no one to call and say, hey, can you help me with this? At the end of the day, the buck starts and stops with you. So I would say that was probably the biggest eye-opening piece for me. Was I always looked at the same that we discussed earlier. You look at entrepreneurs, business owners, and you're like, oh, what a great life. That's fantastic. Look at all, the freedom that they have. Look at the money. And it's easy to say that until you find out what it takes to produce it. And when you truly find out what it takes to produce it, you gain a whole new knowledge and respect for those before you who have done it. And I think that in itself is a big part that helped me with leaning into the knowledge and, starting to read more books and trying to talk with more people who have done, what I've done, who have been here before me. Is that was so hard to go through, and, coming out the other side of it, so to speak, to a point where now I have the understanding and I feel like I've built the discipline to keep going regardless of what, the world or life throws at me. That was something that, I wish I would have known a little bit sooner, but at the same time, it's also, I believe, a part of passage in being a business owner and an entrepreneur, that if you don't ever experience it, then you're never really in the seat that we're talking.
Yeah. I hear you say, I wish I'd have known that sooner, but I don't think there's a way to know that sooner. I mean, somebody can tell you, like you hear all the time, right? Like, it's related to kids, right? You hear all the time, man, it goes by fast. And until you're there, and now my oldest is 17, you're like, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is a senior year in high school and we're transitioning to different stuff. And same thing in the entrepreneurship side, right? Until you're in it, people can tell you. One of the things we say all the time is you have to be willing to be gritty and to endure, because if there's an easy out and you just go back to a job, you're not going to make it anyway. Don't start. Because it's hard. This is not for the faint of heart, for sure.
No. If giving up is an option, even a little bit in your mind, it may not be the right choice for you, because giving up can't be an option. That is non-existent in the world of entrepreneurship. You just can't even see that as a possibility.
No, that's right. So let's, like, if you were to think through, and hey, I'm on a podcast that's talking to new and or potential entrepreneurs. what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give them?
I would say two things. One, accept the statement, you don't know what you don't know. I have beat myself up as an owner and an entrepreneur for years on the things that I did not know and couldn't control. And in all reality, there's just a piece of that you don't know what you don't know until you know. And so there's nothing wrong with not knowing. My biggest piece of advice probably would be understand that you don't know what you don't know, but there's a lot of people out there and a lot of pieces of information, education, again, podcasts, YouTube videos, blogs, websites. There's all kinds of tools, and AI is another one that is growing rapidly with information to be able to find. Lean into the information, find that information. Don't believe that you know it all, because that is the worst possible way to look at it. And accept there's people out there that know better, that know more. And the more that you lean into those people, the more that you ask and seek the information, the quicker and better off that you will be in your business and understanding your path for entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And I think that's important. Like, too often, I think we look at it as an entrepreneur and we're starting a business and we don't want people to know that there are struggles. We don't want them to think that something's not going perfectly for me, the people around us, the people in our industry, our competitors. And so we internalize all that, and we don't build those relationships and have those conversations and trust those people. That's the reason this podcast even exists, right? Is to give you an outlet to do that. Find people that are talking about these pains and be able to go, okay, well, I can relate to that. But absolutely, like, not only don't think that you have to do it yourself and know it all yourself, but absolutely go find those people in your space that can help. If it's hire a consultant, if it's call me and have a conversation with me. To me, it sounds, Mitch, like you'd be willing to talk to people through this stuff too and
Absolutely.
help them and navigate some of that. And I think that's perfect. And I think that's important for people to hear. So let's talk last little bit. What's the best day in restoration look like for you? Well, what's the best part of restoration, or what has been the best day? Like, helped a customer with something, made $500,000 in one day, whatever it is. What's the best part for you about having your own service industry business?
I would say my favorite part about it is when we finish a project with a client, whether it be reconstruction, abatement, whatever that task may be, and seeing and hearing, the smiles and the appreciation for what it is that we did for them. Some of these people are in the hardest, obviously in our industry, are in the toughest times of their life. Their home just burned, house just flooded. It's 3 a.m. and they don't know where they're going. All of these, things that can be in their mind, giving them that peace of mind and seeing the release and the relief of it's over. We're back. Everything is back to normal. And you guys helped us do that. You led us down this path and took us and held our hand through this process. And now we're here. I think a day where I get to see that is my favorite thing. It doesn't happen all the time, obviously, in what we do, but those days when people just truly appreciate that we're there, that we show up in those hard moments, those are my favorite. And usually I would say the most common of those that happen in a more frequency is during a catastrophic event. During a catastrophic event, like when we responded to Hurricane Ida down in New Orleans, going to people's houses and finally seeing someone after a week and not, they've spoken with their insurance, but they haven't seen anyone. No one has come, no one's helping them. And so to see that look on their face and that relief that someone's here to help me, that is huge to me. I absolutely love helping people and doing right by people and getting them back to the lives that they want to live. Obviously, they didn't choose those situations. So truly being able to see that benefit of helping others is my ideal day in this industry.
Yeah. And I love hearing that, right? And I think that leads to the earlier parts of the conversation where you're saying, I got to have the right people. I got to have the right processes. I got to have the right core values and attitude and mindset. I got to want to help people. And when all those things happen and you've established all that the right way, then you do your job, you do it well. And at the end of the day, you get to see that result where people are like, oh my God, Mitch, thank you so much for, like, we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know how this was going to work out. It's been difficult and it's stressful, but you communicated well with us and you did these things. And And that's what it's all about. I think that's great. Mitch, we're crested our time that I try to not keep anybody too long in all this, but man, I certainly appreciate you being here. What a great conversation. And I'm so glad to have you on, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. I greatly appreciate the time and opportunity to be on here and talk with you, Clint. Thank you. Obviously, we've had multiple conversations in the past through Core and such where, you've given information that's helped me in my path. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And thank you for this opportunity as well.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Clint.